Ron? Where is Ron right now?
Ron here. Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I have three pretty major items to share with you from the Danny Masterson criminal trial yesterday. And the first one, and honestly, this is incredible to me. What came up yesterday is that Danny Masterson's first victim, the first Jane Doe #1 in this case, was quite literally threatened by Scientology's in-house attorney. And you've got to hear the testimony on this. This is even more insidious than what the jury is hearing. I'm going to share with you what was testified, and I'm going to explain the backstory that really, this is unbelievably horrible. Most of you watching already know this, but some of you viewers may not know. In the world of Scientology, it is strictly forbidden to report another Scientologist to the authorities, the criminal authorities, for any reason, no matter what, at any time. And that rule was completely in effect with Danny Masterson and the Scientologist women that he attacked. These women were prevented from going to the authorities. They were admonished not to go to the authorities. And they knew that if they did, they would risk expulsion from Scientology and lose, anyone in their lives that had ever been important to them, including their friends, family, employers, what have you. Despite all of this threat, one of Danny's Scientologist victims went to the police anyway in 2004, went to the LAPD and filed an official report about the attack. This set into motion a series of responses from Scientology's management. It set the wheels in motion, and what she testifies to here is what happened subsequent to her filing that report. More or less, as it was reported, this is the back and forth between the district attorney and the witness, Jane Doe 1. You had some concerns about going to law enforcement. Correct. Despite your concerns, you went anyway. Correct. Were you worried at the time doing that it would trigger the declare order? Yes. The declare order is when Scientology declares you to be a suppressive person, you're expelled, and all the Scientologists have to cut all connection and communication with you. You were worried about all the consequences. Is that correct? Yes. There was a discussion about you getting involved in a non-disclosure agreement. Yes. Who was there? A man named Ken Moxon knocked on the door. I recognized him. He was a longtime in-house lawyer for Scientology for a long time, and I had known him. Were you instructed at that time to do anything? Yes. Mr. Moxon handed me a handwritten letter from Danny Masterson and asked me to go outside and read it. And he said he was going to talk to my father about how he would not lose his daughter like he, Moxon, had lost his daughter. Now, the prosecutor did not dig any further into what she meant by that or what Moxon could have meant by that. And he probably would not have been allowed to even ask about that in this trial at this time because of restrictions that are in place regarding what parts of Scientology can and cannot be discussed right now. But let me explain this to you guys. Ken Moxon is not just Scientology's attorney. He himself is a Scientologist. All of his kids have been born and raised in Scientology. Both of Ken Moxon's kids worked in Scientology's C organization. Specifically, his daughter Stacy worked at Scientology's international base and worked for David Miscavige. And I'm going to talk in code here so that YouTube doesn't, suppress or demonetize or otherwise restrict this video. But after years of working in the torturous environment of Scientology's international management base under David Miscavige, Stacy Moxon chose to end her existence in this realm. Stacy Moxon was a member of a team of Sea Org members at the international base who was trained on how to handle the electrical systems, how to deal with and work on the electrical systems at the base. Stacy had been separated from her husband for what I believe was a year or two. Stacy was working at this remote confidential international base. Her husband was posted at one of the other Scientology organizations closer to downtown Los Angeles. She had put in a request for some time off to go see him. This request had been denied. Whatever was going on in Stacy's life at that time, this pushed her over the edge. Stacy intentionally entered a high voltage and restricted area and intentionally grabbed the high power lines to end her own existence. Scientology has lied about this incident, saying that it was a work accident and whatnot. But I know for a fact it was not an accident. I know the people who found her. I also know the person who found the note she left behind explaining that this was not an accident. Now, the probability of Kendrick Moxon being told the truth about what happened to his daughter is pretty low, and yet I would still have to question whether he still genuinely believes this was an accident or not. But now that we know that when Ken Moxon refers to losing his daughter, that he is not referring to the fact that she was expelled from Scientology, but that he lost her because she literally ceased to be alive, then this admonition from Ken Moxon takes on a completely different tone and a completely different meaning. And I do genuinely hope that there is some point in this trial where the prosecution or a witness can somehow get the jury to understand what Ken Moxon actually meant when he said this to the victim's father in the presence of the victim. It wasn't just, gee, it sure would be a shame if your daughter had to get kicked out of Scientology. It was, it sure would be a shame if your daughter ceased to exist like my daughter has ceased to exist. This really ought to drive it home, really bring it home how much pressure existed or was brought to bear in the minds of these women Scientologist victims as to the consequences they were being threatened with if they actually came forward publicly against Danny Masterson, if they actually sought recourse with the law. The second item that I want to bring to you, the second of three items, is what the witness said just immediately following this. The prosecutor asked her, during this meeting, were you told about any consequences? There was already a declare issued for me. Again, the declare is the piece of paper that says you are a suppressive person, you're expelled. There was already a declare issued for me. There was a declare waiting on Julian's desk, and I could go pick it up, or they could work out something. She was referring to Ken Moxon working out something with her father, getting a non-disclosure agreement signed. There was a monetary consideration involved here. So she's literally being told the issue that says you're gone, it's on Julian's desk. Julian is the ethics officer at one of the main Scientology organizations in Los Angeles. You can either go get your declare issue and your life as you know it is over, or we could have a conversation here and we could work something out. Jumping forward a few minutes in this testimony, the victim, Jane Doe 1, says, Julian Schwartz called me. What was the call about? She says, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. The judge says, go ahead, you can answer. He started off in a normal answer. Hey, do you know why I got a call from the LAPD? How did they get my name? How did they get my number? I told him that I had given his name and number to them. He said, yeah, you're effed. You have no idea how effed you are. This is how Scientology ethics officers speak to Scientologists. This is the authority, this is the altitude that they have, that they can speak to them this way. This is a victim of a violent assault, and this is how a Scientology ethics officer is speaking to her for bringing the matter to the police and giving the ethics officer's name and phone number to the police. Julian asked her when she would be coming in to see him, but she knows that he's asking her to come and see him because on his desk, he has the order declaring her a suppressive person. So at this point, her options are go in and see Julian, who's just threatened you, and you've been told that there's a declare order on his desk. Go and see him and have your life as you know it end, or go back and talk with Ken Moxon, talk with your father, and work something out. So you have Scientology's own attorney and you have Scientology's ethics officer, both running a full court press on Danny Masterson's victim. And this is why Scientology is part of this case, because Scientology's dirty fingerprints are all over this case. The third and last item that I want to bring to you from the testimony yesterday has to do with what the victim, Jane Doe 1, said about the Scientology reports that were written about this subject that she was able to share with the police. I can only assume, and I very much hope, that we are able to see these reports in evidence during this trial. I can't imagine that we won't, but we haven't seen them yet, and I really hope that we do. The prosecutor is asking Jane Doe, number 1, what kind of documents, evidence, reports did she turn over to the LAPD? And Jane Doe 1 mentions a things that shouldn't be report. And there's some discussion, some questions, and some testimony explaining that these reports are. Now, what she's explaining is that in Scientology, there's a snitching culture. Scientologists are supposed to write written reports on each other and turn them into the ethics officer. And when you write a knowledge report on someone, you're supposed to give a copy of the report that you've written to the person that you've written it on. But when you write a things that shouldn't be report, policy says you don't give a copy of that to the person that you're writing it on. And she's trying to explain this on the stand. So the prosecutor asks, these are internal reports. She goes, internal reports like a secret about somebody. He says, in the church. She said, yes, only in the church. He says, what else? Any other reports? What else did you give to the police? She says, a report that I had written that Julian had helped me with. What kind of report was it? A knowledge report. Anything else? Mr. Masterson had a report that I included. So to me, I understand that to be Danny himself had written some kind of report giving his version of events of the incidents. It sounded like Jane Doe 1 had received a copy of that. And she turned all of this documentation over to the LAPD. The reason I wanted to include this as the third item is that in this case, Scientology has been mentioned frequently as the reason these victims never came forward to the police sooner. But one thing that hasn't received as much focus is that Scientology and its policies and its procedures and its snitching culture is also the reason the prosecution has enough evidence to bring charges after almost 20 years. Ironically, Scientology is both the reason the victims didn't come forward sooner and is also the reason there's enough evidence to bring this case after 20 years. That is some sweet, sweet irony. And this is something that I've been mentioning in the beginning, that it's hard for people outside of Scientology to truly appreciate how much written documentation gets generated and still currently exists. Every Scientologist has ethics files, auditing files, personnel files, so multiple files for each person. Everyone that had anything to do with these Danny Masterson attacks, meaning anyone who was there, anyone who heard about it, anyone who dealt with the aftermath, would be, according to Scientology policy, required to write many reports detailing exact time, place, form, and event about everything that happened or that they'd heard happened or anything. The Scientology files and the reports that exist on this subject are a prosecutor's wet dream. And it does seem that the prosecution has been able to get its hands on many of these reports because, like was said, in many instances, copies of the reports are given to the very people who were being reported. And when you write one of these reports, you can also put a carbon copy. You can CC anyone you want on these reports. So I could write a report on Joe. I could send a copy to the ethics officer, a copy to Joe, and I could send copies to 10 other people if I wanted to. There's actually no restriction in Scientology on who you can info on one of these reports. And this whole system is going to be, I believe at the end of the day, what allows the prosecution to take Danny Masterson down. So those are the three items I wanted to bring to you. After yesterday's testimony, so the prosecution finished with its direct examination of this witness, and the defense began its cross-examination. Nothing particularly interesting came up in the cross yesterday. The cross, I believe, may even finish today, and we might start hearing from the second witness today. So far, after the testimony from the first witness, I am even more confident now than I was in the beginning that Danny Masterson is going to prison. I understand you never know how these things go. Once it goes to the jury, you never really know. But so far, signs are not good for Masterson, and I could not be happier to bring that information to you. Stay tuned for more. We have the third day of testimony happening today. I'm doing a live stream at 5 p.m. Eastern with Andrew Gold about this case. If you'd be interested in watching that, just make sure you've got the notifications turned on. Even then, you might not get the notifications, but anyway, at least you'll have the best shot possible. All right, stay tuned for more, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thanks to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right